Why is it you people can never explain anything
Kwasi is a
tangible?
Brexiteer.
Do you remember when Carole Cadwalladr was called a mad cat lady for wandering and trying to investigate the Russian interference particularly in Brexit, but also in UKIP Reform Brexit Party? Do you remember that? Well, finally, Carole has been vindicated because Nathan Gill, who was head of the Reform Party for Wales, was a Brexit Party MEP and was very much Nigel Farage's right hand for several years, has been found guilty. In fact, he pled guilty. He admitted it, that he was taking Russian money to shill for Russia, to make pro-Russia comments in the EU Parliament.
The head of the Met's counter-terrorism command called it a case which goes to the heart of our democratic values. Nathan Gill will be sentenced next month. Imprisonment, his barrister conceded today, nothing.
Do you regret taking the bribes, Mr Gill?
The former leader of Reform UK in Wales.
How much money were you paid, Mr Gill?
Not ashamed or afraid to be patriotic, he declares on his social media profile. Not afraid either, it turns out, to push a pro-Russian agenda in return for cash.
Now, I can remember several of these same realities that Nigel Farage himself did in the EU Parliament, talking positively about not stoking the Russian bear. And it seems that Nigel did this pro-Russia message for free.
What is better, to have Russian soldiers fighting a war on the territory of Ukraine, or NATO troops exercising as a response to that on the territory of Ukraine?
I think, sir, the point that I was making is that there should be a huge degree of guilt in this House about what provoked all of this in the first place, and we saw Western Ukrainians waving European flags, rioting, setting fire to things, and effectively staging a coup d'etat which brought down the Ukrainian president, which has led to this instability. Yes, you are the guilty people, and you refuse to accept it.
But Nigel does say that he's patriotic and loves Britain, and he's got a lot of flags everywhere. And he encourages people to put up flags. I will note that most of these flags, I'm sure, are made in China.
The star witness is not a human rights leader like Navalny, but a far-right, pro-Putin politician who leads the UK Reform Party, a party that has 4 members out of 650 members in the Parliament. He calls England an authoritarian regime, while saying that Vladimir Putin is the world leader he admires the most.
But there's, at the moment, a lot of flags everywhere. I drive on the roads and on the bridges over the motorways and the dual carriageways. There's flags. They're really Chinese flags, as I've said, but they're either English flags. St. George, who wasn't even English, his father was Turkish and his mother was from Palestine. That these flags are a show of patriotism.
I mean, Nigel is a man of common sense. It's kind of golf club common sense, you know. But
I'm going to unleash Marina on you for that.
Which bit of his common sense do you admire most, Peter from Wolverhampton?
well, he was absolutely against the madness of Europe, and he's now against the madness of immigration, and that's common sense.
And do you think, you're glad that we Brexited? Do you think that's worked out, do you?
Yeah, absolutely, because Europe was a madhouse.
Yeah, and how are we doing now? How are we faring? What do you love about Brexit the most?
A lot better without being in the madhouse, but common sense is a very important thing.
Yeah, but what are you enjoying most about your new Brexit freedoms?
Being free.
And to do what that you couldn't do before?
But it is
And yet, why can we have this reality that Nigel Farage is leading in the polls, and we know that his party has got a Russia problem because his Chief Lieutenant Nathan Gill has admitted that he took Russian money to sing for Russia, and Russia they are attacking Ukraine. They've invaded Ukraine, and the majority of this country are pro-Ukraine. So why are people thinking that Nigel Farage is apatriotic and the right person to sort out our problems. When Nigel Farage gave us Brexit, he really is responsible for ensuring that the Conservatives were forced into having this referendum and pushing the lies that it would be absolutely brilliant and give us cheap food, footwear and stop immigration. And actually it did the polar opposite of all of these things. It increased immigration by 4 times. It's made food much more expensive, energy much more expensive. And today, because Keir Starmer decided to cozy up to Donald Trump, another bestie of Nigel Farage, and do a sweetheart deal using statutory instruments, sovereign power, to whack it into legislation without any parliamentary debate or discussion as to whether this is a good idea. But to save the 7% of steel tariffs that we send to America, he did a sweetheart deal with Donald Trump, which threw the bioethanol industry under the bus. They've closed, and now we've had an absolute dumping of Chinese and Asian steel because we're not within the protections of the single market, and the European Union are going to use their powers to stick 50% tariffs on our steel. And guess what? 78% of British steel went to the European Union last year. And then people are online saying the European Union, we're better off out of it because they're not looking after us with the steel. When actually Keir Starmer, when Trump came out and did his offensive, instead of cozying up to Trump, what he should have done was absolutely get down on one bended knee and beg to rejoin the EU Single Market and Customs Union, because it was obvious that Donald Trump was going to start a trade war.
What do you think it would take to get this country growing again?
Go back into Europe? Seriously. I mean, I've never met Starmer, but if I ever did, I would ask him, is it possible? What mechanism would it take to effectively get down on your bended knees and beg to be allowed back in again? That's what I would do. If I was in charge, I would beg to get back in again.
I've never really associated you with begging.
Exactly. That's how bad it is.
We need to defend against this trade war instead of opening ourselves up to cheap imports and then leading to a trade war with Europe. Not only that, by putting the American trade deal onto our legislature, it is also violating the TCA and really stretching out the Northern Ireland situation, as I have discussed in other videos.
Rosie is the Brexiteer.
So what Peter is referring to is, I think Europe is in a mess. Look at today, the French government, they're going to have their third or fourth prime minister in as many years.
Is that a reason to leave, though?
No, but when people say, oh, Europe is this wonderful thing that we should have stayed in forever.
No one's saying that, but we were better in it than outside of it.
That's complete nonsense.
Sorry, I'm sorry, and also, we're having to plug the gaps now. Do you understand? Do you at least acknowledge, because you were also spearheading Brexit, do you not acknowledge the damage, the loss to the Treasury, the loss of tax receipts as a result of our leaving the EU?
What I do acknowledge is the fact that we managed to get a much better deal with Trump's America on the tariffs than the EU did.
Do you think we've lost, as a nation, have we lost any wealth because of Brexit?
I don't think we've lost.
You can't have a conversation with someone if they're going to say that.
No, I don't think we have. I mean, you look at Europe.
I never know.
But look at Europe. Are they growing? Are they forging ahead? Of course they're not.
Well,
of course they're not.
I tell you what, there's all kinds of factors. We had to help bail out Greece when we were.
Yeah, we did. It cost £9 billion.
I just don't know.
Kwasi Kwarteng, our divorce agreement alone was 38 billion.
That was 12.
38.
Yes.
For nothing, a divorce.
Okay.
Not even the
So
impact.
if we'd stayed in, we'd have been on the hook for all the other bailouts and all the.
Well, there haven't been any though. So,
no, there will be.
All need to work together because the world is dominated by big trade blocs. Britain going on its own just gets awash with imports. So by overreaching with an executive decision on the American deal, Starmer made the decision completely himself with his cabinet and put it into our legislature without any parliamentary oversight so that these things could have been discussed. As in, it's all very well doing a deal to save 7% of our exports. What happens if the European Union decides to whack tariffs on us and that's 78% of our exports. Well, guess what? That's just what happened. And all sensible voices at the time of Trump's unveiling of the stupid tariff war said Britain needs to get back closer to our friends and allies, our biggest market. We needed to get back in the single market, at least begin the steps to try and get back closer to work with Europe. But oh no, Starmer thought with Peter Mandelson, who we now know is gone, because he's been actually proved also to be an absolute disgrace with Jeffrey Epstein. And they thought that they could do a sweetheart deal with Trump and somehow come up smelling of roses and be great for Britain. And actually what's happened, the British steel industry is going to be annihilated. And we've got the same thing happening with cars. There are loads and loads of Chinese cars flooding in here because they've been displaced by Donald Trump's tariffs. And we've got nothing that we can do to stop these things coming in. And eventually, probably the EU will say the same about cars and put tariffs on us again. Great. This is all a Brexit reality for us. We could have ridden this storm if we were part of the European Union. But oh no, we've got Brexit and we've got a Labour government that has made disastrous decisions on Brexit by cozying up to America and Donald Trump, which is the wrong decision. I am absolutely livid because this sweetheart deal with America has already obliterated the bioethanol industry, all for nothing. It's also left us open to cheap American imports and probably a Mercosur deal with the South American countries, which is unsurvivable. It is unforgivable what is going on. Britain is being absolutely decimated by Brexit and Brexit reality.
Specs, what are you doing in the garden? Spexy?